Lo queremos invitar una vez más al escenario a Demian Reidel para poder conversar unos minutos con el profesor. Vamos a mirar un poco más al futuro juntos. We are inviting Demian to join you for a couple of minutes.
Yeah? You choose. Empezamos? Well, what a pleasure, and it's a treat for me to be able to interview you. Let me just go at it. There is a short story by Isaac Asimov, A Feeling of Power, where humanity relies on computers so much they forget how to do basic calculations. They do not even know how to multiply. And then there is a total revolution when somebody rediscovers math, but basic math, like 2 times 3. And that gives one of the galactic civilizations the edge over the other one. Do you think we're headed in that direction? We're becoming stupid?
I teach physics at the university level, and there was a debate as to whether or not we should allow slide rules and calculators in the final exam. Some professor says, if students can use calculators, they don't have to think, and we don't want that. So no calculators in the final exam. The other group said, that's stupid. Everybody uses calculators, and problems are so complicated, it's better to use calculators. Who won the debate? The people who said, let them use calculators, won the debate. Today, in every physics laboratory on the Earth, students are allowed to have calculators. And so my point of view is, yeah, we don't want students to become totally dependent on computers, but day-to-day operations require you to be fluent in computer technology. So it's okay. So my attitude is, get used to it. Students can use calculators.
Just a last one on that one. A calculator, you need to punch the numbers and they need to mean something to you. This, you can say, solve this problem, and then you go to sleep.
Yes, there's a danger that people get overly confident about this. But there's another Asimov story that I would like to talk about. Long time in the future, people asked a computer the question, can you reverse entropy, that is the death of the universe? Will the universe die when entropy increases to infinity? Well, this goes on for millions of years. Every time somebody builds a computer, we ask the computer, will the universe die? Is entropy going to go on forever? Is it all for nothing? Finally, the end occurs. The stars twinkle out, they go black, the universe gets dark, cold, entropy wins, humanity is about to die. Then, just before the end of humanity, there's a flash of light. And all of a sudden, there's a voice from the computer. And the voice says, I will recombine all the stars, recombine them, and they will ignite to create a new Big Bang. And then the computer says, in the beginning, I created the heavens and the earth. In other words, computers will become so powerful, we will create the creator.
Well, that sounds pretty good to me. And we know the answer. The answer is 42. Right? So I have another one. My questions are to you on basically the feature of humanity and what it means to be human. Because I started with, are we becoming stupid? And the second one is, what do you think about the next wave of being a cyborg, like implants? Because you didn't touch upon that, but some of your graphics show that you're thinking about it, like enhanced or extended humans. Where are we going?
Well, ever since humans walked the earth, we would alter ourselves. We used makeup. We tried to bulk up our muscles with certain technology. We would shave ourselves. We did all sorts of things with makeup and dyes and tattoos. Tattoos everywhere. And now people are putting hearing aids and implants in their body, in fact, for when diseases occur. How far will this go? And I think it's going to go much farther. At a certain point, we'll be able to put on a helmet to increase brain power. Think about this. Increasing the power of the mind by putting on a helmet of some sort. That's definitely a possibility of the future. So my attitude is, what's wrong with that? Nothing. I don't think there's anything wrong with tattoos. If people want them, it's their privilege, it's their body, right? And if there's a machine that makes them smarter, so be it. We'll have smarter people.
True. There's one thing that you mentioned about the difference between digital computers and Mother Nature and humans particularly. Not that my opinion, you don't have to hear my opinion, but I will just challenge you on that one. How is our brain that different from digital computers? I mean, neurons, if you do like a simplified model of the brain, neurons fire or they don't, and the first advantages of AI, or just neural networks, which are the digital version of the brain. So how is our wetware that different from digital computers? I don't know that you can say, oh, it's digital, therefore it doesn't feel, I mean, maybe it will feel something different, it will think differently, but can we really say it's not a matter of complexity? Is it really totally different for you?
Well, I think we're getting closer and closer to the realization that in some sense, we are robots, okay? We are made out of flesh and blood, not steel and plastic and transistors.
Wetware.
But we have wetware. And the wetware performs like transistors. They transform like other kinds of organisms. And so we have to realize the fact that we humans are not special.
Okay, I love that. I think, yeah.
In that case, we are, in some sense, an organic computer. Very sophisticated, much more than any mechanical computer that can be created today. But we should realize that we are not superior. We're not spiritual. We're not simply gifts from God or something like that. We're animals. And that we have evolved in a way to take advantage of the fact that our brain power can be increased to increase our longevity. Because humans have one advantage over other animals, and that is a large brain. Where do we find that in the animal kingdom? We're the only ones that have large brains. And so there's nothing wrong with altering ourselves to have even bigger brains.
Fair. I mean, we are the apex predator here. But, I mean, as you said, we're not that special. So where are we going? So what's happening? I don't know. The near, even not the far future, the near future seems pretty uncertain to me. So what do you
Well,
see
the
in
near
world 5,
future,
10?
on a scale of a few decades, first of all, many people are saying that we need an insurance policy. We're changing the weather. We have to worry about food supply in the future. And the alternative Earth would be Mars. And at that point, perhaps we should have an insurance policy on Mars. And why not have two branches of the human race, as long as we don't war with each other? So that could be the future. The future of the human race could be in outer space.
It's cold. So what's worrying you? Is there anything worrying you about what's happening today? I mean, I love that you have a pretty upbeat view of what's happening. Do you see that there are any dangers? What are your thoughts?
Well, many of my friends are pessimists. They say, look at the COVID epidemic.
They have a worse
Look
time.
at these wars, these skirmishes taking place. Constantly wars we read about, right? Where's the bright side of things? My attitude is the smallest unit of history is the decade. Anything smaller than a decade, you find all sorts of ups and downs, forward, backwards, mistakes being made. But on a scale of many decades, you see progress. You see the fact that nations that used to be poor are now becoming middle class. China, India, who would have thought? Who would have thought that in one lifetime they would become superpowers in their own right, able to feed their own people? It used to be, when I was a kid, we used to talk about the sick man of Asia.
Right.
China, India, they will always be sick. Now, why is that? There are too many of them, right? Now we realize the more people you have, the more brain power you have, and the more you can do. And now people are worried that perhaps India and China have too many people because they can compete with Europe, which is declining in population, getting smaller. And so I think that people have changed their opinion. People create value. That we're not the sick man of Asia anymore. We're realizing that industrialization means that a poor person can be empowered to create value, not simply absorb value.
Well, then I have something to tell you. So you have been so gracious to come visit us. We have something to give you. You're actually, right now, living one of the success stories of living decades of decline. So we see a new potential beginning. So Argentina is actually perhaps going through that transition right now after decades of decline, thanks to a new administration. So thanks for visiting us.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that I'm an optimist, but I'm an optimist with qualifications. Optimism over a period of decades. When you look at months, weeks, you get very pessimistic. When's the next massacre going to take place? When's the next setback? So I tend to not look at history through the lens of a microscope. You can have to look at the history on the scale of decades, and then you see real progress. You see real progress. Think of the life of your grandparents. Think of the life your grandparents used to live in. Poverty, disease, warfare, pogroms, all sorts of nonsense that took place in our history. Most of that has changed now.
Well, the saying, God give me patience, but give it to me right now.
Right.
So I guess that decade sometimes is a good benchmark, but for us it's a little long.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, so you don't see anything that worries you, the current trends like AI arrival. What do you think?
Well, another pandemic is always a problem, okay? The last pandemic of COVID caught us off guard. But now we're beginning to create defense mechanisms around these things. For example, sewer tanks. People used to think that sewer tanks were for garbage and sewers and you want to throw them away. Now we realize that you can detect the next COVID by analyzing human waste in these tanks and jump the gun, be one step ahead of the virus by analyzing sewage. And so we're realizing a new front on the question of longevity. So I think that's a good thing. But there's still some things that we have to worry about. Nuclear weapons, we still have them, thousands of nuclear weapons. We still have to worry about the fact that, another COVID-19 can spring out of nowhere. We have to worry about that. The global warming problem. The Earth is warming up. That has to be a measure of concern. But overall, I'm optimistic.
Well, on this optimistic thought, I just want to share something that I got from Neil deGrasse Tyson, which was at the turn of the century, the 1800s to the 1900s, there was a tremendous concern in the city of New York. It was the impending manure catastrophe. There were so many cars driven by horses that people didn't know what to do with the manure, and they thought that the whole transportation system was going to collapse. That was just 5 or 6 years before the invention of the automobile. So that tells you that sometimes the problems that are worrying us are not really the things that are going to kill us.
And that's the reason why I believe in education, that we have to educate the next generation of people to become inventors, to become scientists, to create the inventions which are going to save humanity. So education, I think, is the weak link. Nations that are poor, why are they poor? Because people are not educated. Once you educate them, then they create value. They create more value than they consume. Without education, they consume more than they create. And that tipping point is a tipping point which makes or breaks nations.
I actually have a question precisely on education. I think that, when people say, oh, what should children study? I think today, I have no idea how to respond. Because maybe 10 years ago, you would have said, oh, you should computer programming, because that's going to be clearly something needed in the future. Now you don't need that anymore. Maybe just very few. So you say education, and that sounds right. But to study what? What would you recommend a 17-year-old kid that needs to go to college, or whatever it is, whatever, maybe not college, but what should people study? What should they learn?
Well, 100 years ago, if you wanted to become a blacksmith, right, you didn't need much education. You just had to have a big arm and be able to fabricate metal, okay? Now technology has caught up to the point where machines can do that faster. Machines can do that better. And so we have to have a love affair with machines. So machines aren't the enemy, but we have to train ourselves to monitor the machines, to make sure they don't get out of control, to improve them, to repair them, and to create the next generation of machines. And so machines are not the enemy. There's something called the Luddites. The Luddites 100 years ago.
I'm not a Luddite.
A Luddite is a machine breaker. The enemy is the machine, they said. The solution is to break the enemy by breaking machines. Well, machines are inevitable. They just get more and more powerful, cheaper and more powerful. It's up to us to be on top of that so that we can harness that for people who are not so educated, so they too can become part of the education process. And as I mentioned in the slideshow, a lot of menial jobs require minimal education, but they can still be done by humans. Fixing plumbing breaks, gardening, construction work. These jobs do not require advanced PhDs, but they do require a knowledge of basic mechanics in order to fix a broken pipe.
And, well, the last one, you know, one thing you didn't mention is that you were talking about this type of jobs, but the one thing that AI is doing this time, for the first time in the history of mankind, is attacking across the board high human capital jobs. So it's not just repetitive tasks. Lawyers, doctors, this is and people who cannot really move from sector to sector, because you cannot be a lawyer and turn into an engineer. So there's plenty of uncertainty. How do you see the social cohesion in a transition like that?
Well, when you talk about lawyers, for example,
no offense.
realize that lawyers have to understand human behavior, and robots do not understand human behavior that well.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, I'm not saying they can't ever understand human behavior, but people's motivations, who's right, who's wrong on a dispute, these are value judgments, and value judgments change with time. So when you read a book about the law 100 years ago, you say to yourself, how backward, how archaic, but that was the law 100 years ago, right? So robots do not understand this. They don't understand human behavior. They don't understand human norms. And so that's why you have to have a human be on top of the machines so the machines don't go berserk and violate common sense.
Well, let's wait until ChatGPT 6. Let's see.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
No,
This
thank
is
you.
most illuminating. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Muchas gracias a Michio Kaku, muchas gracias a Demian Reidel por esta increíble conversación. También para cerrar,